Thank you, Laura. And happy birthday to Laura. It's her birthday today, so good to have her up here sharing with us. Well, y'all, it's here. It is Super Bowl Sunday. Y'all excited? Well, some of you, yeah. Anybody rooting for Kansas City in here today? Okay, a few of you. San Francisco? Nobody? Really? Wow. My wife asked me, she was like, well, what are the colors of the teams? I was like, red. You know, you can just say go Big Red and you'll be doing good either way. How many of y'all are just in it for the commercials? Anybody? Yeah. How many of you don't care about any of it? Okay, okay, all right. But if you love people, you'll still be here tonight. So anyway, yeah, you know, it took a lot for these guys, for these teams to make it to the Super Bowl. I mean, you just think about all the things that they've given up, how long they've been playing. A lot of them have been playing since they were 3, 4, 5 years old, and they've gone out, they've practiced every day, and they've changed their eating habits and their sleeping habits, and they've given up all kinds of things to come out here and be able to get to the pinnacle of their sport. This is what kids dream of. This is when they're first starting out, man. They're picturing the Super Bowl and how they're going to be. You know, they're going to make the winning catch or the winning run or the winning tackle or interception or whatever it might be. This is what they have been working for all of their lives, and now here they are tonight. And so, you know, in a sense, even if you don't like football, just the idea of achievement, it's kind of exciting that they are where they are, and it's kind of almost a celebration of that. And there's a lot of hoopla that surrounds the Super Bowl, but they don't really care about all that stuff. They're just excited to be there, and they're going to try to win a world championship, be the best football team on the planet. Now, you think about all the things that they've done to get there, and you think about all the practices and all the hitting and the catching and all the drills, and you think about all that kind of stuff, but there's one other thing that kind of goes into it that's really a big deal that has taken up throughout the course of their lives. It's taken up a lot of their time, and if you have played sports, at least in the modern era, maybe not some of you when you played a long time ago, but in the modern era, if you've played sports, you know what I'm talking about. It's going into the film room. You go into the film room and you're watching footage of previous games. You're watching footage of your opponent, of the games that they've played, but you also spend a lot of time, these players spend a lot of time watching themselves on film. And they might have sat down with a coach who sat with them and was pointing out different things that they were doing right and different things that they were doing wrong. And of course, you think about that. If you're out there and you're performing, you're not really thinking about this video that is being taken. You're just out there giving it everything that you've got. And then when you get into that film room and somebody is breaking that film down, and you got a coach who's sitting there pointing out the good and the bad, don't you imagine that it's a little bit more fun to look at the good things? I mean, when you really made that tackle, or when you really, really hustled, or when you made the right cut at just the right time, don't you imagine that you'd rather watch that stuff? That's the more fun thing, when they're like, man, boy, you really laid it on them right there. That was a great, great move that you made. That's the part that you really like. But you know where the real growth takes place, right? It's when you're looking and that person did a move on you and you went this way and they went that way and you really looked foolish. Now, you don't want to pay attention to that stuff, but you know, that's where you're going to really learn, because you're going to learn, you don't look at their head, you don't look at their shoulders, you watch their hips. That's really what matters. You're going to learn this is how you should have caught the ball with your hands, not with your chest. You're going to look at the things that weren't so great, that you weren't doing so great, and you're going to be able to pinpoint those, and then you go out and you work on those and you make those things better, and you become a more complete player. So really, the growth is going to take place when you look at something that you're not quite as good at. Does that make sense? That's how these players got to where they are. Well, this morning, I want us to look at something that maybe we're not that great at. And I don't just mean us as a church, although it would really apply to Emmanuel Baptist Church. I'm talking about something that would really apply greatly to many of our churches, to Christianity, to Christendom in general, at least in the United States. Something that we kind of struggle with, that we've kind of put on the back burner. It's not quite as fun, it's not as sexy, and it's certainly not as easy as some of the things that we have replaced it with. And my guess would be, if I were to go in here and I were to ask each of you as individuals, and then as I was to look myself in the mirror, and I asked just a few simple questions, I imagine it is what we would look at in the film room that we really wouldn't want to be looking at in the film room, but it would be necessary for us to look at it in the film room of our own lives so that we can take that next step, so that we can do better next time. It's what we call evangelism. It's what we call sharing our faith. It's what we call telling other people about Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not going to ask this out loud. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but it would be interesting to know how many people have told someone specifically about Jesus and how they can be saved within the past week or the past month or year. Now, the reason that I'm just making this assumption, the reason that I'm just making this guess, is because it's been a while since we raised that, what do you call that? That screen. And I got in the waters back there and I baptized someone who had just come to faith in Jesus Christ. It's just been a while. And I've been here for a year and a half now, and it hasn't been very often. I could count on both hands how many times I've been in there. After, I hadn't really counted the number of days, 365 plus was 180, so you're looking about 530 days, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I've been in there less than 10 times. Now, I'm not just pointing at you, buddy. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I mean, I'm supposed to be leading this congregation in all things, especially in that area. And I know what I've done, and I know what I've not done, and I know where I failed. And so, when we're in this thing together, I'm just saying we got to look at the film, and we got to say this is where we're blowing it, and we got to learn from that and take off the next chance we get. We've got to work on our area of evangelism. And it is a desperate need, because I'm just telling you, there is not a more basic, it is the basic, most fundamental calling that you and I have been given. It is at the bottom of it is just the basics. As soon as someone would get saved, as soon as someone would give their heart and life to Jesus Christ and place their faith in Him, the call was placed upon them, go now and tell the people that you know. That was it. It's just the most basic. And yet, it's what we struggle with the most. Oh man, we can talk about coming to Bible study. We can talk about coming to those classes tonight and how to take the Bible and apply it to real, regular life. And people are like, yeah, I'm in for that. We can talk about prayer, and people kind of get on fire about prayer, and we'll have an altar call. People come down here and pray, and we'll send a chance for people to go home and pray, and people will put that stuff into practice. They'll do that. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with any of that, of course. But then we talk about the most simple and basic calling that we have been given, to share our faith. And people are like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. It's one of the reasons that we're sharing that class tonight. Share Jesus without fear. Because I don't want to just stand up and say, hey, this is something we ought to be doing, and then as leader of the church, not provide an opportunity for you to know how to do that. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this thing. And today, I want to, if we've been called to this, I'm just saying it is now time to go. It's time to go. And so I'm going to invite you to open up your Bibles to John chapter 4. The Gospel of John chapter 4. I encourage you to take out that outline. If you don't normally take notes, I would encourage it even a little bit stronger this morning, just because there are simply 7 observations that I would like to make about John chapter 4, about a few short verses. 7 observations that I want to make that I believe will be very, very important and very telling, and I hope very motivating for you and for me to do what we've been called to do at the most basic level. Now, I'm gonna give just kind of a brief explanation, I guess, of this passage. We'll make these observations, and then we will move on. John chapter 4, beginning, it says, your outline says there, verse 34, that's fine. I want you to back up so that we will understand what we're getting at, and to back up to verse 31. He says, meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat something. Now, you ever had to tell your kids that? You ever had to tell your spouse that? You ever had to tell someone, we're talking about grief share, man, one of the first things to go oftentimes in grief is appetite. And have you ever gone up to somebody and says, eat? You have to eat something. Why do we tell them that? Why do we encourage? Why were they going to him to encourage him? Man, you've got to eat something. The reason is because eating is our sustenance. It's what keeps us going. It's what gives us strength. It's what gives us energy. And so they're encouraging him, you really need to eat. Now, it's very important to understand that, to understand the reason behind eating, because he's about to take that whole idea of physical sustenance, physical sustainability, and he's going to give it a brand new spiritual meaning. So if you and I are going to understand evangelism, and especially some of the things that we're about to say about it, we got to understand what eating means for the physical body. Okay? So they come to him and they say, hey, come on, Jesus, you really need to eat something. But he said to them, I have food, that sustenance, that sustainability, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So, of course, they're still thinking in the physical. So the disciples were saying to one another, no one brought him anything to eat, did they? And Jesus said to them, now he's going to turn it all around. My food, my sustenance, my sustainability is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Now, stop right there for just a moment. If this were just in a vacuum, if this were kind of something that was off to the side, by itself, standing alone, I think most people, they would enjoy that. They could handle that. They could kind of take that and run with it in certain ways, in whatever way that they wanted to. Because he's saying, listen, what sustains me is simply doing what God tells me to do. And we would all say, absolutely, amen to that. Whatever God tells us to do, if we'll do that, that is our sustenance. But Jesus didn't just say that in a vacuum. He said that in a context. He is about to explain what his sustenance is. He's going to explain what drives him, what motivates him, what gives him energy. Okay? So, he says, I've got, it is my sustenance, it is my food to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, here's the context, that there are yet 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, that they are white for harvest. The whole idea is that you're saying we can wait to go and do God's will. No, he's saying, listen, people out there right now, as we speak, need Jesus. And there are millions and millions of people who need Jesus right now. And this is what drives me. This is what gives me energy. This is what motivates me to get out of bed every morning. It's that there are people who are lost and going to hell at this moment if we don't do something. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for life eternal, so that he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this case the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. You have joined their cause. So we have to understand that when he's saying, this is my food, it's not just some random, ethereal, general sense that I'm going to follow God's calling. No, my food is to go do what God has told me to do, and that is to seek and to save that which was lost. That's our calling. That's you and me. You can't place that on your Sunday school teacher. You can't place that on your preacher. Your preacher has to place it on your preacher. But you, as well as me, we got to look in the mirror and say, that is for me. So, 7 observations. And I believe, and with all of my heart, I believe that I have taken every single one of these from this passage that I have just read to you. In other words, this isn't like my opinion. I'm not trying to guilt anybody into anything. I'm not trying to come up with some motivational plan or any of that kind of stuff. I've just got 7 observations that I believe should motivate us from this passage, that I believe should motivate us to do a better job of sharing our faith with the people who are around us. Number 1, our spiritual health is measured by our evangelism. Our spiritual health is measured by our evangelism. Now, I have said this in a number of different ways over the past year. And then the way I've said it is you know, that diamond that we had when we're talking about what our purpose is. We have, we exist to share the love and hope of Jesus Christ with the people of Savannah and beyond so that they might become fully functioning followers of Jesus Christ. That's our purpose. And we said what a fully functioning follower looks like is they have communion with God. That's first base. They have connection with other believers. That's second base. Third base is they are committed to ministry. And then, and what I have said in the past is people feel like if they are accomplishing those 3 things, that they are fully functioning followers of Jesus Christ, and that is simply not true. They're incomplete. Now, they're on their way. They're on a great journey. They're going down the path, and we can encourage them in that, and I can encourage you in that. But we have not scored a run. We have not reached home base until we are then seeking the conversion of the lost. Our spiritual health is not complete just because we know all the Bible stories, just because we spend all of our time in prayer, we're here at church every time the doors are open. Our spiritual journey is not complete. Our spiritual health hinges on evangelism. That's a pretty heavy statement. But when Jesus is saying that my food, my sustainability, my energy comes from evangelism, I'm not sure how we can depart from that. Number 1, our spiritual health is measured by our evangelism. Number 2, our obedience is revealed in our evangelism. Notice how he begins to talk about this when he says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. And if it's in context talking about evangelism, that is the will of God. It's the will of God for Jesus Christ. It's the will of God for you and for me as followers of his. Our obedience is revealed in our evangelism. You know how we normally define obedience as believers? Just listen. Just go to your Sunday school class and listen to your next discussion that you have in there. Usually obedience is defined by what we don't do. I haven't killed anybody. I don't lie. I don't cuss. I don't drink. I don't get mad at people. I'm not mean to people. And so we talk about the things that we're not doing. And that seems to be the totality of our definition of obedience. Listen, what if you just went to your kids and you said, your kids, they finally stopped talking back to you and they finally stopped throwing their clothes down on the floor, but that's all you ever got out of them. Is that really the best that we can expect from our kids? Don't we expect if we're going to have an obedient child, don't we expect them to do what we tell them to do, not just the absence of something? Well, he's saying, listen, this is the will of God, that we are called to something, not just away from something. We're not just prohibiting things. We are called to something that is much better. And that something in this context is the obedience of evangelism. Number 3. I hate to tell you all this. Y'all aren't going to like this very much. Our excuses don't cancel out our call to evangelism. If you look at verse 35, he's kind of saying something that might often would be said. There are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest. And he says, but hold on, the harvest is ready right now. And what he's saying is there are a lot of people who might say, well, we can put this off. Now is not the time. Here are my excuses for not doing this. He said, but those excuses don't work. You might say it's not time, but it is time. Oh, it's not time because I don't know enough yet. I don't know enough of my Bible yet. I don't have all the theological answers. I don't know what to say. These are the excuses that we come up with. And we think, in our minds, we think that if we give those excuses and we say them enough, and it convinces our spouse, or it convinces our preacher, or it convinces somebody that I don't have to do it, that's good enough. It's simply not good enough for God. Your excuses, my excuses, don't let us off the hook. Whatever we think those excuses might be, however good we can make them sound. They simply do not work with God. I mean, I love Japanese food. Japanese food is my favorite, all right? And I love sushi. I mean, just raw as it can be, yeah, kind of, you just dip it in that soy sauce and that ginger and the wasabi and all that. Oh, man, it's just good. I'm making some of y'all hungry. I'm grossing some of you out. You take that raw food and you put it in there. It's just great. I love sushi. I love Japanese. I love it when they're up there and they're cooking in front of you and they're, they're throwing eggs all over the place and they're throwing shrimp in people's mouth. And I love the whole Japanese thing. And if I went to it, can I just tell you something that really surprises me? I didn't really think about this until just a couple of days ago, and I was having a conversation with someone. It came to my realization. Jennifer might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that since I have moved to Savannah, I don't believe that I have been to a Japanese restaurant where they cook in front of you. Now, I've been up here to Seasons of Japan and some of the like fast food Japanese places, and those are good. I like those, but I hadn't been where they do the kind of stuff, and they got the fire and then the smoke going everywhere. I hadn't been to one of those yet. So let me just tell you, if I come up here to, is it Miyabi? Is that the name of it? Something? Yeah, Japanese place. When I go there, I'm gonna tell you about it. Because it's gonna be fun. And I'm going to have some reason to tell you about it from the pulpit. I'm going to make up something because I love Japanese food. Now, what if I loving Japanese, what if I started thinking about, well, I don't really want to tell anybody because I don't really know what knife set they used. I mean, I don't know about the knives that they use. And or I'm not so sure that they used all the right spices. I don't know the mixtures that they had and all that kind of stuff. I don't know all the details there. Or what if I said, well, I don't want to tell anybody that I ate Japanese because maybe they're culturally sensitive and they like Chinese food better than they like Japanese food. And I go and I give all these reasons. These reasons are ridiculous. I don't have to know all that stuff. I don't have to be concerned if somebody likes Chinese more than they like Japanese. I don't have to be concerned with all that stuff. You know all I got to do? I just got to come up in front of you and say, you know what, I went to a Japanese place and they did some really cool stuff and they did this little train with this little whistle and they were throwing food everywhere and it was really great and the food, it tasted great. I don't know all the details about all that stuff. All I know is I went to a Japanese place and it was fantastic. Do you know that you don't have to know all the details about even your own salvation? You don't have to know all the details about God and Jesus and be able to describe him and explain the book of Revelation or anything. You don't have to know all that stuff. All you got to know is I came to Jesus and my life was a complete wreck. And look at what he's done with me. That's all you got to know. If he's done something in your life, and you tell it. All of our excuses on the planet, you can pile them up one on top of another. God's going to say, so the fields are white unto harvest. Number 4, second time. Our world's condition should fuel urgency in evangelism. Our world's condition should fuel urgency in evangelism. I didn't bring my phone up here. I meant to bring my phone. So let's see. I've been up here now, I believe, for 30 minutes. Have I already been? Is it? No, I haven't been here. How long? What time did I get up here? Anybody know? How long have I been up here? Somebody just tell me. I know some of y'all are keeping up. Somebody. 25 minutes? Okay, I've been up here for 25 minutes. 25 minutes. Anybody got a phone? Somebody multiply this for me. 25 times 60. Y'all got that? 25 times 60. Now, somebody multiply that number by 5. I hope y'all are ready for this. By 5. What's the number? 7,500? There have been 7,500 people who have died and gone to hell since I started. 5 people. Every tick, tock, tick, tock. 5 more people. 5 more people. 5 more people have died and gone to hell. That's the world you and I live in. You might be surrounded by your holy huddle and you think everybody's saved. No. 5 more. There just went 5 more. There just went 5 more. We are in a desperate situation. People are dying and going to hell while we keep our mouths shut. There should be an urgency because of the world's condition for us to be involved in telling people about Jesus. I don't care what it costs us. I don't care what pride we might have. I don't care what fears we might have. The world is an urgent situation. Number 5. Notice this. He says, our reward is great for our evangelism. He says so in verse 36. He says, already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for eternal life. Do you know that we don't find it recorded for us anywhere that there is rejoicing over in heaven because somebody gave a large offering to the church? Now there's a lot of rejoicing in the church, you know. There's a lot of rejoicing in the pastor's office. There's a lot of rejoicing on the finance committee. We don't read about it in heaven. We don't read about rejoicing in heaven over church attendance. I'm glad that you're here this morning. I wish there were twice as many people in here. Then I would be rejoicing. I'm rejoicing that you're here. But I don't read about heaven rejoicing. I haven't never read that heaven rejoices when you and I get finished reading a 3-set commentary on the book of Romans. You might be proud of that, but God never says anything about that. The only time I see about rejoicing in heaven is when one sinner repents. And if that causes rejoicing in heaven, you can bet your last dollar that God will reward those who created a party in heaven. Number 6. Our fellowship with the great saints of our faith is established through evangelism. That's what verses 36 through 38 are all about. There have been people who have gone before you. When you go to tell someone about Jesus, let me just tell you, you're not the first. You're not the first one, more than likely. At least in America, 98% of the time, you will not be the first person who have told them something about God. You will be building upon the work of another. And someone will come behind you and they will build upon your work. It is what gives us great fellowship with all the great saints. What do you have in common with Peter and with Paul? Can I just tell you, you probably don't believe all the same things that they did. You don't believe everything that St. Augustine believed, or Martin Luther, or Billy Graham. You don't believe all those same things. You want to know what you have in common with them? You want to know the fellowship that you have with them? It comes in evangelism. And if you want to step into the halls of the great saints of our faith, it will be done through the corridor of evangelism. And then the last one also may be somewhat of a surprise, but our fellowship rests on our obedience to evangelism. In verse 38, he says, I sent you. I sent you. You're gonna sit here and tell me that you're close with Jesus and you're following Jesus and you love Jesus and you just want to hang out with Jesus and yet you won't go tell anybody about him? No. It don't work that way. He says, I'm sending you. That's what Matthew chapter 28 is all about. That's what Acts 1:8 is all about. That's what Romans chapter 10 verses 14 and 15 are all about. I am sending you. This is your calling. And your fellowship of Jesus Christ is inherently tied to your willingness and obedience to evangelize. Now, for today, we're gonna talk about this for a couple more weeks. And so I'm just trying to give you a place to begin. I'm just trying to challenge us to begin. I'm not asking you to go out and win the world. I'm not asking you to come out here to the mall and stand there in the food court and start just talking out about Jesus. Now, if that's what God tells you to do, go for it. I'm not telling you to do that. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. And I should have put this in your outline. So I'm going to encourage you. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. What I simply want you to do for the next week, if you don't want to do anything else, okay? We're going to make an agreement. We're going to meet halfway there. I simply want you to tell God this. You ready? Just write this down. Tell it to God every day. Lord, put this in quotation marks. This is all I'm asking you to do. This is simple. Lord, comma. I feel like I'm talking to Siri now, right? You got to give all the commas and Lord, use me to win the world. That's it. Not asking you to say anything. Not asking you to go preach anything, memorize anything. Lord, use me to win the world. That's it for right now. We'll try to progress a little bit more along the way. But I believe it all will begin with an earnest prayer like that. Now, a lot of people won't share their faith because they don't have a faith to share. And so, as always, before we enter into a time of communion, we want to invite you, give you the opportunity, if you don't know Jesus, to come and to receive him so that you will have a faith that you can share with others. And if you don't know Christ, I'll be standing down front for just a few moments. We're not going to take a lot of time unless we have some response. If we've got some response, we'll take as much time as we need to. But I'll be standing down front. You come and take my hand and say, I want to receive Jesus. The altar will be open, and maybe there's just something. I'm telling you, there's just something when we physically bow before God, and you may just come down and say that prayer. Lord, use me to win the world. Get up, go back to your seat. You can say that prayer there in your seat as well. You do as God leads. Lord, we thank you for the day that we heard that someone stepped out of their comfort zone and they shared. And Lord, this is, I know it's not in mine. It's not in my wheelhouse at all. And yet I know it's within my calling, most certainly. Not as a preacher necessarily, but as a follower of Jesus Christ. And so, Lord, I pray that you'd spur us, all of your followers, onto action, whatever action that may be, as you unveil that to us in the days and weeks ahead. Lord, right now I pray for those who don't know you, that maybe they've recognized that they have a need for you, that they would call out to you now, and that they would be saved, and gloriously saved, and have a story to tell. In Jesus' name, amen. You stand.